about, I feel like a failure. I have no idea how many times I hear that in a year. I feel like a failure. Someone said to me, why this failure syndrome? Maybe right after some big victory. I just happened to see somebody a second ago that after one of the best victories I ever saw them have, they felt like a failure right away. I mean, why is it that we have to fight this failure syndrome and feel always going around acting as if we're nobody and we feel like a failure when we know we have the Holy Spirit in us? If we've accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior, we know we're going to heaven when we die, and us feel like a failure? Why? And a lot of times people say, I know so-and-so couldn't feel like a failure. That's ridiculous. She's just saying that because she does this and this and this, and how could she feel like a failure? It might be because she's out of balance. She might be somebody really, really important in church work. And maybe that maybe is a very important part of what she is in church work. But then if that's all she is, then she looks at all the rest of that. She looks at all the rest of the board and sees what she is not doing, and then she feels as if she. Okay, she says I can use it. Okay, good. She looks at everything else and feels a failure there. So it doesn't matter how much A++ she might be at one area. She still feels like an area in all the other ways. We get out of balance. And when we're out of balance, we feel like a failure. Chris Grafton, would you tell us a little bit about feeling out of balance?
The other day when Mrs. Evans was talking about a wheel and being in balance, I said, Miss Evans, did you know my dad was a wheel alignment specialist? And he balanced wheels. And people would bring their cars in because their cars were shaking or it was bumping because it was out of balance. And he took these tiny little weights. Some of them are bigger, but this is a small one, but this looks like exactly it is a weight, but there's all different sizes. And if he'd take a special machine and he'd put a weight over on this side, and his machine would shake the tire, and it's off balance here, and he would put a weight over here, and all different places on the tire there would be a weight, and that weight would balance the tire. There was never a perfectly balanced tire until they put these weights in the areas it needed. And then 6 months later, cars would have to come back in because they'd say, my tire's out of balance, so maybe this side would be worn, and they'd have to balance the other side. Ladies that have the weights, would you please stand and start giving the ladies a weight? We're going to give you a little weight tonight. Matter of fact, I took my weight, and I made a necklace of it. I'm starting a new fundamental fad here with Mrs. Evans' weights. But this little weight is to remind you that when a life gets out of balance, just like a wheel does, and it's never perfectly balanced, we're always having to work on different areas, but this weight represents the balancing of a life like it represents balancing a tire wheel.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think it'd be good if we took this down and put it down on the floor in front of here. They might be able to all see it a little better than up here on one side. So if a couple of you could come up here and take that down to the front, maybe they would see it just a little bit better. We run to what we're good at to solve our conscience and feed our ego. For instance, 2 single girls told me that they went soul winning for several years almost every day, which is isn't that exciting? Isn't that wonderful? Except they had no meals, didn't go shopping, didn't go grocery shopping, no food in the house, no meals, no clothes clean, and no house clean. So they ran constantly to soul winning. They felt comfortable and did a tremendous job of soul winning, and were A+++ in soul winning, but still felt like failures. And of course the rest, everybody else thinks, how could they possibly feel like failures? Because they saw the rest of their wheel. Another lady told me, she's a beautiful homemaker. She tells me she never wins a soul or teaches a Sunday school class. Never does anything. Barely shows up in church. A beautiful homemaker. Now, isn't that right to be a homemaker? Isn't that great? It is really, really good, except she never does do anything else in whatever her personal wheel would be. It has to be your own personal wheel. Some of you don't work outside the home, so that wouldn't be in yours. And something else would be in yours. I have mine all into many, many different parts. In fact, we'll give you a page of a handout in a little bit that shows the number of things I divide mine into. But each one of you should personalize it. One lady takes a bigger position in the church than she has been having, but gives her kids their way to make up for not being with them very much. Do you see why she could feel a failure? We all see her going up, up, up in positions in the church, and that's great. Except she gives her kids their way because she is not with them very much. One lady told me, these are people who have really talked to me about this way. One lady offers to do more in order to have a perfect church social, but cannot get through her own house because of the mess. Now, people, we don't need to judge a person like that. We just need to know that's what makes them feel like a failure. We all have different things where not a one of us is perfectly in balance. When we're perfectly in balance, we'll be in heaven. but it won't be so hard. It's not so hard to work at it. It's not so hard to fix it. If you're constantly walking guard, know your wheel, and constantly walk guard around it. Check, 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 check. Change a little bit here, change a little bit there. Watch out here, watch out there. Shore up this here, and work that way. So many times we say, I have to do so much at church. And a lot of times it isn't we have to do so much, it's that we want to do something perfectly so people will look to us to show their appreciation of how good we are. And it somehow getting B's all the way around isn't as exciting as one big A+++. There's very few people who are going to come up and give you a plaque for having B's in your homemaking and all these different things. You're not going to get a whole lot for doing that. But it's going to be quite a wonderful life. To be a balanced person and be short. And if a B is what you can get and take care of all your life, then that is an A++ for you. And by the way, C is average. And there's got to be some average people. And if that's what you can do, then that's an A for you. As long as that's what you can maintain. Now, somebody can maintain A's and maintain them all the way around, great. Just be sure that if you can maintain A's all the way around, you don't think everybody else should be able to too. Also. That's what's so very perfect. Mrs. Colson sitting over there saying, right, let me tell you, that lady is the perfect example of one who can do so much, be balanced, have a lovely home, be the wife we all love to see her, be with her husband, do her church work and so forth. And yet when you call with the most stupid question, she doesn't act like it is. And she acts like she gives it attention and acts as if it's the most exciting question she has ever. She doesn't say something like, well, everybody already knows that. Well, everybody obviously doesn't already know that, or I wouldn't have called her. I mean, someone wouldn't have called her. You don't feel badly about going to Elaine Colston. You think, oh, wouldn't you be intimidated because she can do this and that? No, because she acts like it's a perfectly wonderful thing that you took the opportunity to come to her and talk with her about whatever the problem might be. So it is a temptation if you are one who could keep everything going at a high level. It is a temptation to wonder why can't everybody else do it too? And that's just natural. It isn't natural. It's very supernatural, and the Lord's given some real abilities there. But just be sure that you are able then to give some of those abilities away. One lady volunteers 15 dozen chocolate chip cookies to bake to bail out a ministry that's in a problem when she says she cannot keep her children under control. Because it's just there's people no matter what you ask for, they can do it. Their hand goes up. They can do it. You know, and you wonder how in the world who are you looking at? To whom are you looking? Excuse me. One lady says she never has we're not to judge other people. We're just supposed to judge ourselves, and then not too harshly. Just know the problem and shore up and watch out about what you offer to do. I don't think any pastor, I know our pastor sure does, want someone to go above. I heard him say just within the last month or so, you might have to give up some church work if you're not doing well with your husband. Didn't I hear that? I heard that. It was a whole sermon on balance, this very type of thing. And you know what preacher says about himself? Now, we think there's one area when I don't think he's telling the truth, and that is when he talks about himself. He says, now, I'm not this, and I'm not that, and we just sit back there and snicker. If he isn't, we sure think he is. But anyway, I know he knows where he could be. So he really doesn't think he's A in all these areas, and I believe he doesn't. And we'll just let him believe that. But anyway, we believe he does. And I'm sure that, like he said, if he put all his time on sermon building, though we believe we get help here for the very minute he talks to us, and from then on out. But if he can do, I know he could do oratory like R.G. Lee or whatever he wanted to if he chose to go that way and spend more and more and more hours just on that one area, his preaching area. So he knows where he could be in all the areas of his life. So he has chosen to be, I guess he'd say a B. That's hard for me to say. And so that he can be a well-balanced pastor for us. One lady works on her outside job so well that she can give money to the church to attempt to make up for never going soul winning. The first time I realized that, I was in Highland Park Baptist Church. I was in my adult Sunday school class, and I was talking and trying to get people and seeing when people were going to come to visitation and then out to soul winning. And she said, we don't go, we hire a bus route, and we hire, and I thought, wow, that really sounds good. Except it doesn't work. One lady has a perfect home but never extends its hospitality to family or friends. And people, you know where you're out of balance. We judge others who aren't running to our areas. Like if someone is not just going soul winning, but running there constantly, all day long, every day. We judge, sometimes if we're doing that, we want to judge those who are not doing that. Or if someone has a job outside the home and they've just gone from teacher to principal or nurse to charge nurse or teller to vice president of the bank or something like that, we might even, if we were like that, judge someone who wasn't being promoted in their work. Or if we're taking on another job at the church beside the several we already have, then why can't someone else? In fact, someone will say, well, I don't see why you couldn't. Because only you know what you can do and be a balanced person in all areas. No one else knows. They say, well, I do it. Why can't you? Well, we don't know what their health will be like 15 years from now. We don't know what their home will be like 15. We don't know that. And so you have to decide for you what you can do and to keep in balance and stay in balance. Don't compare. 1 Corinthians 10:12c, comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. I'd love to get you onto a vacation right now, but you're not having to compare yourself with another person here. Wouldn't that be great? If the rest of this week, while you're here, you didn't compare yourself with one other person, you could only be the best you can possibly be. And people movements and all this type of thing seems to come and go, and we get out of balance and imbalance and all that type of thing. I'm thinking about to work or not to work outside the home. 10 years ago in 1989, I wrote a chapter in Help, Lord, They Call Me Mom, and I had written it a long time before that, so it's about probably 15 years old. It's in page 57. Are you confused? To work or not to work outside the home? And I took all kinds of cases in here and talked about young widows who were responsible for their payday. And are you sure that the ideal is probably not to work outside the home? And if you do work outside the home, you better be very careful that you don't do things that would get yourself promoted. And that if you could stay home, you would be able to use coupons. You would be able to not have to buy so many work clothes. And you better be very careful that you don't spend more money going outside the home than you would staying inside the home. And then I talk about, for people who say, well, I just am not challenged inside the home. On page 61, and I gave it here at the Spectacular one year, 45 things I gave that if I could do all of these things, there is so much to learn. And I know some of you say, I don't get anything more done when I stay home than if I go outside on a job, because everybody expects that I can do everything. But if you are busily learning and taking care of these things, you might be able, and you can say no. You can say, I have an appointment, and your appointment can be to mop the floor. And so that's up to you. So I talk about, now, when I wrote this, there was sort of a movement going across the nation that if you didn't work outside the home, you were a nothing. And people almost apologized and didn't want to say housewife or homemaker or anything like that. They were embarrassed. Now there's a little ripple of a movement that you're embarrassed if you do work outside the home. People just you might want to read to work or not to work outside the home. And do what you and your husband and your Lord show you to do. And don't discuss it with anybody else. And if you decide not to work outside the home, just don't. But you know, like I said, we don't have to get after someone who's not going along our path the minute we're going along that path. A+ at a church work or a job doesn't make us look so much like a failure, but it's not exciting to have all B's. I would like for you, I not just would like for you, I've made it possible for you to get one of the last copies of Redbirds and Rubies and Rainbows. I hope every one of them's gone. We've had 3 printings of them at the Sword of the Lord since they started. I think it was 15,000 one time and 10 and 10. And the last 2,000 were at the Sword, and we brought them here about in March, I believe it was, and ready particularly for this conference. I'm teaching right now from How's Your Balance? I have a poem I wrote in here about it. I talk in here about even a washing machine will quit when it gets out of balance, and it will, won't it? And you just can't stay out of balance very long and not feel like a failure. And I'd like for you to make notes in the book. I'll be teaching from it. It'll be our textbook for the week, for the few days that we're here together. I'd like for you to make notes in it. If there will be no more printed, we are not going to print it at all ever again. If you have one at home and get one here anyway and follow along in the book with me this week. I signed every one of them the last 2 days. Every one of them. Every beautiful one of these Redbirds I signed. And the people who helped me and I prayed over these books this is the prayer I asked them to pray. That as they handled a book, that they would pray, whatever lady got a hold of it. If you buy it for someone you're going to take it back home to, if you buy it for a Christmas present or you have it for yourself, that a lady would be helped because of some of the chapters of this book. One of the on page 209 is Circle of Protection. I actually believe this circle of protection is what is keeping me from depression. My last place I was speaking was Mayo Clinic. They asked me to speak to cancer survivors of my kind of cancer. And I was there last Saturday speaking to them. And they wanted to know how to not stay so depressed. Well, one of the ways would not to be to go to a Mayo Clinic medical meeting. But it was really something. I thought, if the Mayo world just had my church, if they just, I got to tell them that they said, now what has kept you going? I said, well, I was so scared I wouldn't get to say this. And everybody was praying that I would get to say this. I said, well, of course, when I was 17, I made sure, knowing that I was a sinner, for all of sin and come short of the glory of God, for the wages of sin is death, and for the whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord, and these things we may know, and we know we're going to heaven, and then if I live, I know he'll never leave me nor forsake me. I got to say it all. To the researchers, big time researchers from cancers all over. People who are obsessed about finding some help for ovarian 4 cancer people, advanced ovarian cancer people. They were there, the researchers, the people who made the Taxol, which was one of the components of the chemotherapy I'll be taking the next time, which they think will be about midwinter. My cancer is active again. And this is the second recurrence on an ovarian 4. And I got to tell them, they said, now what is your support group? I said, it is a church of people. And the support group leader is my pastor. Did you ever know Dr. Howes was a support group leader? And I said, and he told us, and I gave everything. He said to give up false hope, give up bitterness, and give up despair. And so I've been doing that, because if you give up despair, you got to have some real hope. My real hope is I will have a remission again, and if I don't, I'll have help to not die as hideous a death as some of the people. And the people broke out, didn't they, Carol? They broke out in applause for Dr. Hiles. And we went to lunch and sat down, and they said, we were just talking about your pastor and what he said. And I never did say the name, not that I was ashamed. I just didn't want them to think I was coming there and trying to preach a church to them or anything like that. And I'm telling you, it's something to be able to know that we have things. Somebody told Carol, she went with me. First time she's gone with me on a trip for 1 year and 3 months. I lost her, to that man. And to think that we've got, they said to her, she ought to write a book. And so here's my book. I wrote